interesting. Okay. That is interesting. Yeah. Oh, hey everybody. I think we are on live now. Am I right? Welcome. That is interesting. Let me do this real quick. There we go. That's good. Oh boy. Hi everybody, welcome. Glad to be with you once again. This is Common Ground. I'm John Lombardo, your host. So glad that you could join us. Let me get some of these things in order. We're getting ready to start. Hope you guys are having a great evening. Hope you're having a nice Friday evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to pull this up. Just kind of get myself ready here. There we go. Yeah. How was your week, everybody? We're going to start here in just a second. Thanks for being here with us. Let's see. Hi, Julia. Glad you're here. Hi, Denise. Hi, guys. Really good to see you. Let's get started. Let me kick us off as I do. Where did my... That's not what I wanted. Never mind. Here we go. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. You are on Common Ground, the place where we seek to transform division into understanding, where we seek to fearlessly explore ideas and opinions. At this point in history, fear and bigotry threaten to tear our nation apart. On this show, we seek to strike a blow against the fear that divides us by listening to one another as we discuss the most difficult topics with respect, civility, and the mind open to a differing opinion. I'm happy to tell you that we found over and over again that when we can discuss our opinions freely, we can form an alliance of reason with our fellow citizens. Even when we may not agree, we discover we're not all that different. It's not so hard to reach common ground. I'm your host, John Lombardo. Our topic for tonight's discussion, America and money. It's a good week for it too, isn't it? There's a new sheriff in the White House, and we are at it again. As Biden enacts a plan that has some people cheering and other people jeering, one thing remains clear. We Americans do not agree about where and how our wealth should be spent. Tonight we're going to discuss this, so let me start us by bringing on my co-host. There we go. Where is he? Let me move this out of the way. I'm going to bring in Eric Rodriguez. Oh, I see. Let me bring you on here, Eric. There you are. So Eric is joining us now. Eric, good to see you. How are you, my friend?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I want to take a minute and hi, Christy. I want to take a moment and say a couple things. First of all, guys, if you will, please share this on your page so that more people can see what we're talking about and join the conversation. I also want to let you guys know that we are reaching the end of Common Ground. I told you guys we were going to do this a few weeks back, and we're going to do a show this week. We're going to do a show next week. Then we're going to take about 3 or 4 weeks off, and we're going to create the new show. It'll still be me and Eric. It'll still be a show about a conversation show, but we're looking to expand the topics. I feel like Common Ground has... I don't feel like we have to man this post anymore. I feel like, I'm going to speak frankly, the desperate need to model civility is not so desperate with one shut down Twitter account. Who knew? But we'll be on every week, every Friday, just like always. The new show is going to discuss a wider range of topics with a slightly different bent, not so political. We're still going to have a show. But I just want you guys to know, because many of you are here with us every week. We're going to do next week is Common Ground. And after that, we'll take a couple weeks off, and then we'll be back with a totally rebranded, different show format. I'm really excited to share it with you. You guys will all still be involved just like you are. Oh, look at that. My Perrier can shows up invisible. Isn't that Spooky. So tonight we're talking about money, and how we what we do with money in the United States of America. There's two stories happening out there right now that kind of drew us to this, that made us want to talk about this. One of them is, of course, the $1.9 trillion coronavirus relief plan that Biden has rolled out, which has met with some opposition in the Republican Senate. And then, well, it's not a Republican Senate anymore, is it? It's a pretty evenly divided Senate now. And then the other is this interesting story about, is it GameStop? Is that what it is?
GameStop, yeah, and AMC. GameStop wasn't the only, but GameStop is the big newsbreaker, and then there was a couple of other situations that happened. But yeah.
Did anybody out there lose money in that? Like did anybody out there watching right now, did you guys have any personal experiences with that? And I'll be the first to confess that I don't know that much about the stock market. We do have a guest this evening who is a Wall Street veteran. So I'm really excited to have his perspectives on these things. But I'm just wondering if anybody out there, did this affect you personally? Any stories or personal, anecdotes that you can share, that there's something like this? That Grace made $128. That's great. Good for you, Grace. It couldn't happen to a nicer person. Love you. All right. And Julia said, can't wait. Thanks, Julia. We can't either. We're really excited about it. The other thing I want to say on here is I might as well, I'm going to be advertising this everywhere. I might as well advertise it amongst all you nice people. I'm going to be seeking to actually hire someone to promote this show. If you know somebody who's really good at promoting things on cross platforms, we're going to be doing the show not just on Facebook. It's going to be on Facebook. It's going to live on YouTube as a podcast. We'll probably do it on Instagram TV. So if you know anybody who promotes things on social media for a living and is good at it, I'm willing to pay them I'd like to hire them to help us promote the new show when it comes out. So that's another thing I want to get out there and plug to put out there. So Grace is the only one with a story about making money. Eric, why did you want to discuss this topic tonight? What was your interest in it?
Yeah, so I know nothing about money. As anyone who knows me will attest, I get a paycheck, and then if there's no pandemic, I travel around the world, and that's as far as my interest in money is concerned. And and just really don't know macroeconomics. I have no idea, like what what it means when the interest rates are high or low, or I mean, I can understand when I read things. I know when what it means when someone says budget surplus or deficit spending. I mean, I can understand these concepts basically, but like I don't. But one of the things that really caught my eye about this situation was that it seems to me that in so many ways we have these pockets of people all around that are trying to find a way to grab some agency and to democratize systems, and that happened in this GameStop situation. Somehow some regular folks figured out how to job the economic, whatever anyone wants to say. I think that it's really clear that
They got together on Reddit and decided to do it, right?
correct. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
And yeah, just a bunch of people, like decided, like, hey, we're gonna do this thing, and figured out how to job this the system that's been, and then, I mean, what appears to me, maybe I don't understand it correctly, but what it appears to me is they figured out how to play the game, and some people who play the game for a living are really pissed off about it. So there are some billionaires out there crying, literally. There's a video going around of, I forget his name now, darn it, this billionaire who thinks that these people are doing this just to pick on wealthy people, and that the idea of fair play is bullshit. He said that in his statement, um, and it's this is just another one of those examples of like the wealthy, the ones that have the power, like they don't want to give this up. And what happened? Somehow there was some stoppage, and I have to ask Brad because I don't understand. It's like they took their football and went home. They went, oh wait a minute, we're losing at our own game, and then they
Yeah,
shut
they
it down.
stopped. They shut it down. They blocked the trading on the site. Yeah, let's. Sharman said it was Leon Cooperman. That's the name. Um, well, let's talk about this a little bit more because my my overarching thought for this show tonight was when you talk about money in America, one thing is for sure, we have a lot of it. Um, America is the wealthiest country in the history of humanity, and we all know that a lot of that wealth is controlled by a small group of people, and it just seems to me that at any time wealth is being distributed outside of that circle in any significant way, there's a very effective machine to shut it down. Like it's very efficient and effective to stop that from happening. But
Well,
I'm not that's just a layman's view of it, huh?
I don't think there's. I mean, look at what happens, and and somehow you
You
get
see what
regular.
happens, Larry?
See what happens? You get regular people. Like why are people that are that make my kind of income, why are they worried about the debt that possibly might happen when this corona bill, like how does that happen? It's politicians can are protecting their own and convincing. It's the Our government mostly works backwards. Politicians and the elites convince the populace um, of the position that they want them to, as opposed to we don't tell the elites and the legislators what they should do. They tell us what to like. That's usually how it goes. That and anyway, we should get Brad in
Let's
because
get Brad in here. I wanna get Brad in, guys. Welcome. It's ladies and gentlemen. It's Brad Goodwin. Hi, Brad. Thanks.
Hello. Hello.
Thanks, brother. It's really good to have you here. Thank you for being here with us. Um, so, guys, I'm just going to tell you that Brad has spent his whole career on Wall Street. He's worked for. I'll let you talk about what you do, Brad. I won't go into great detail about that, but he knows a lot more about this stuff than we do, than Eric and I do. Of course, that bar is very low.
That's the good news. And that's why I'm qualified, is the bar is so damn low.
Hey, Brad, I'm going to ask you a philosophical question to start
Yep.
this off because Eric was just talking about how the way things work in America, it seems like the elites and politicians kind of tell us what to think, tell the masses what to think about money and about their own well-being and things like that, and they swallow it. I think that that's true, and I think that that's what makes them elites. I think I once heard a gentleman say that if you took all the money in the world away from everybody and distributed it all evenly, the same people would have it within a few years because of the way they think and behave.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think that's probably true. I mean, leaders tend to lead and followers tend to follow. We have a time now of it seems to me like hyperactivity of groupthink, and groupthink tends to follow a leader. So leaders are maybe more powerful now than they have been in a long time in our country. And our leaders, Elizabeth Warren today and others, have come out to say, and related to this whole GameStop situation of what's going on with these short squeezes, is we want to be able to say what fair market value is, which is a classic example of leaders trying to take more power over free market forces. It's a fascinating time in our industry.
Do we have a free market?
Um, I would say we have a free market that's manipulated by those in power.
Okay.
yeah, I was saying to John a minute ago that I know nothing about finance, and I mean I just know nothing, but it is very clear to me that our government, through subsidies and regulation, and they steer this ship. It is not by any means a free market. We have free market principles, and we have certain levels of competition, but our government decides a lot of who can be successful, and creates pathways for success, and cuts them off as well. And I was just saying to John, like, I don't really understand this, but it looks to me um like some rich people got mad and took their football and went home. Like people figured out how to play the game that they're playing. And we should rewind though before I'm ranting.
Right.
Why don't you tell us what happened with this GameStop situation? And you probably have to start with what's a hedge fund, what's a short sell,
Right.
and what just like a try not to go on too long. Just like what
Brad,
happened?
before you do that, exactly want you to do exactly what Eric said. Before you do that, let me just say, hey guys, well, this is Common Ground. Some of you just joined us. We're talking with Brad Goodwin. He's a Wall Street veteran. If you have any questions about what we're talking about, type in the chat. I am going to hop over and take some comments. So questions or comments, please feel free to pop them in, and we'll handle them as best we can. So sorry, Brad, I just wanted to get that in. Please go ahead.
No, that's great. So yeah, I've been working for major Wall Street firms for the better part of 26, 27 years. Actually 28, this is my 28th year. All the big players, I've worked for all of them, big Swiss banks, US Wall Street firms, et cetera, major US banks. And now I'm what we call an independent, a registered investment advisor. So I'm not beholden to any major Wall Street firm. But the basics of what has happened here, it's fascinating. It's one of the most fascinating things I've seen in my career. But I look at this as Occupy Wall Street applied. So, Occupy Wall Street was, we're all going to show up with our bodies and tell you we're not happy with the disparities of wealth in our country and the system that's created that. This is, and nobody cared, right? Wall Street didn't care, governments didn't care, policies didn't change. It's like, I'm sorry, you're unhappy, go home, take your tent with you. This is, we've figured out how to harness a large enough mass of people, a critical mass, through Reddit, which is basically a community that was following Wall Street and said, wait a minute here, these hedge funds are making money, they're profiteering from the demise of companies that we like. And to some degree, they're engineering the demise of companies we like. And GameStop became the lightning rod for this. So a hedge fund is basically, it's a mutual fund, but it's a mutual fund that's not marketed to the masses and publicly traded. It's marketed to qualified investors that meet a minimum threshold of wealth or sophistication. And because it's not marketed publicly to the masses, it has a wider berth of strategies that it can use to make money or hedge against different economic headwinds or tailwinds. So hedge funds are, it's a very broad term. There are some like I could start a hedge fund tomorrow and call some wealthy friends and we could go buy some properties and that's a hedge fund. Or what we're talking about here are sophisticated algorithms and risk assessments in the form of billionaires that start a hedge fund and have a lot of millionaire and billionaire clients, and they are maybe hedging against their other asset exposures because most wealthy investors have exposure to US stocks, foreign stocks, US real estate, et cetera. So they're always looking for non-correlated assets, assets that will move in a fashion that is not related to the US markets, or inversely correlated. Maybe they want something that moves opposite direction of the US markets. The intent being reduce the peaks and valleys, right? Get a smoother trend line, reduce peaks and valleys. So that's what the hedge term came from. So what happened here is, in particular, this hedge fund came up against a group of investors after they heavily shorted GameStop. and GameStop has a following of fans, et cetera. But a lot of it, what happened was GameStop became so heavily shorted, there were more shares shorted than in the float available to buy. So it set up this kind of perfect storm. And so shorting a stock means this. And it's fascinating that you can actually short a stock, because you can't short any other real investment, really. I can't short my car, I can't short my house, but I can short a stock. So that means, what does shorting a stock mean? It means I really don't believe in the value of GameStop as an ongoing stock. I don't think their business model is viable. I want to profit from them going down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find someone that owns GameStop stock. I'm going to borrow it from them. I'll pay them some interest for borrowing their stock. I'm going to sell it. So I'm going to sell something I don't own. And then I'm going to wait for it to fall. I'm going to buy it back and give them your stock back. And I made the delta. I made the profit.
That's the short sell.
That's the short sell.
Okay, I understand that.
Yeah.
And this is all going to my theory that the stock market is all 100% bullshit, and it's only just a playground for a few rich people. But you continue, please.
And that would be the theory that a lot of these folks on the Wall Street boards have as well, which is why they're kind of relishing and sticking it to these guys. So yeah, if I'm a big mover in the market, a big institution, and I come out publicly, it's a public disclosure, I'm shorting GameStop. That's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy to some degree. And it's fascinating that they can do that, and they do that. And that's that pisses off a lot of common investors is, I don't have the power to do that. I can't move markets in favor of my trades. In fact, I like GameStop as a company. I want them to keep existing. I own some of their shares, and you're just bullying that thing down, right? So that's what set this all up. The next level of what's happening here. So then, okay, so that's the short sale, right? So billions of dollars, borrowing stock, paying interest, selling the stock, hoping to buy it back cheaper. That's how I make my profit. Okay. What happens sometimes what's called a short squeeze. So somebody makes that bet and gets it wrong. Let's say I shorted GameStop at $30. Stock goes to 20. I feel great. I'm $10 in the money. And all of a sudden something turns around. In this situation, GameStop got a new board member who was very perceived to be very favorable to GameStop's value and strategy. And the notion became, what if GameStop became a Netflix of video gaming? So there became some momentum behind the stock. And then everyone jumped on that and the stock started to bounce. And then it became, holy cow, if this stock bounces enough, all those guys that short sold it have to come in and buy it. If we refuse to sell, there's no shares for them to buy. And then the thing just starts skyrocketing. The next level of skyrocket catalyst is something called a gamma short squeeze, which means, and not to get too complex and cut me off if I'm going too deep on this, but so I'm the one that short sold it, right? So let's say I short sold it. It was at $30. I short sold it. It went to 20. I feel great. But I am worried that it's going to bounce because my risk is unlimited. Thing goes to 1,000, I got to buy it back at some point.
Well, and that's real, because it did go up to 300 or 400 or something, right?
Yes. And so it's a little bit of a tug of war. It's poker. It's like, who's going to blink first? But what might happen is when I sell short at $30, I might be worried about my unlimited risk. So I'm going to go find another counterparty or a market maker, and I'm going to buy calls on that stock. I'm going to buy the right to buy that stock at a future time at a future price that we will determine in the form of an options call contract. And for these numbers, let's say I buy the calls at 40. I sold the stock at 30. I think it's going to go to 0. But in case I'm wrong, my risk is capped at 40 because I can buy the stock back at 40. So now stock rallies. The person I borrowed the stock from would like their stock back. I got to figure out how to solve this debit of mine of all these shares. Stock starts breaking through 40 up into 50, the person that sold me the calls, my insurance blanket of I can buy these stocks back at 40, now they're freaking out because they owe me the stock. So I might be needing to buy, they might be needing to buy, and that's when that's what this whole community is betting on, is this gamma wave of forced buying of a stock they are now owning and refusing to sell. So that is the spikes you've seen, is this tug of war of we're not selling. At some point, you're going to capitulate. You're going to give up. You're going to have to close those shorts. And this thing, and I'm holding out to $1,000. You're not getting my stock from me. This is what's going on. It's never happened before. And I think it's because there's never been a large enough group to be cohesive enough to do the math, understand it, and then band together and hold on to it. And they've got a whole community of language and culture and stuff that they're using. They're calling themselves diamond hands. They want to have a grip so tight they don't let them go. And they're calling the weak people paper hands because their grip is so loose, they're going to let their stock go on anything. And it's a funny community. It's actually quite entertaining on Reddit to go to Wall Street Bets and read it. There's a fair amount of sophisticated people in there. And it's basically the little man saying, screw you, billionaires, stop pushing the market around. We're going to get you back.
Brad, do you think that this is ultimately, is this a healthy thing? Is it something that's going to have negative ramifications long term? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it'll be a pivot point. I really do. I think they're going to try to solve it with regulation. The first response was to solve it with pressuring the brokerage firms to stop allowing the behavior. And that happened yesterday. And so GameStop stock went from, 320 back down to like 120 overnight. And then there was a lot of pressure overnight from everyone from Ted Cruz to AOC and to others, Elon Musk and such, that the firms caved a little bit today and allowed more buying, and the stock went right back up to 320. In fact, it spiked up to close to over 400 today, settled back down around 300. So yes, a lot of billions are being lost. I think they'll try to figure out how to create some regulation. They'll keep this from being an ongoing thing because it is very disruptive. And there's pros and cons. I mean, I believe these investors are not doing anything illegal. They've got a strategy. It's not behind closed doors. It's not insider trading. It's not the billionaire boys club manipulating markets. They're all out there on the internet having a discussion of, hey, if we do this, this will be the result. And I think that's fine and ultimately probably pretty healthy. But those hedge funds are owned in pension plans, are owned by larger institutions, and will have negative impact on regular people who may have that in their pension plan and such. So there are these.
I've got a question from one of our viewers. Andy said, "Thanks, Brad. I'm enjoying the activism against the big hedge guys. I don't have any skin in the game, but are mom and pop 401ks collateral damage?"
They could be. Most likely a 401k plan would not. It'd be more like a larger, sophisticated pension plan that would have exposure to a hedge fund. My 401k plan, most people's 401k plan, it's run-of-the-mill mutual funds that would not have exposure.
I have a question for you, Brad. Can I give you some money to borrow your 401k plan just long enough to drive the value down and then sell it back to you? Is that?
Yes, that'd be great. Yeah. I mean,
that'd be great.
Yeah. Think about that in the terms of another asset. What if I borrowed your neighbor's house and all your neighbors' houses and sold them all and tried to drive the prices down and buy them back cheaper? I mean, think about that. It's a weird idea that this is even a legal endeavor.
That's the part that seems sketchy to me. Julia Lee said, "I think it's great myself. Go Reddit group." Carol said, "Only as much." She said, "It isn't about our economy or the growth of the business as the stock market is gambling, winning money from people who didn't guess as well as you did." The money, and she said the money wasn't lost; it just went to someone else. So I'm sorry. Go ahead. What were you guys saying?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say that, but this is what's always going on. We're just learning. The regular public's just learning about it because regular public are getting in on the game.
Yeah.
everyone's always pushing the market around totally. I mean, you brought up Elon Musk. I remember Musk and Trump, like not all that long ago, tweeted things that had huge impacts on the market. That's nonsense. That's not value. That's not real. You know, their opinion is like,
Yeah.
and you know what I mean? And it's people figuring out how to manipulate people's emotions so that they do something to artificially,
Yeah.
create fear or confidence. But
Well,
Yeah.
it's not necessarily artificial though, right, Brad? I mean, if somebody tells me, "Hey, John, you better put um, you better put some sandbags under your garage door because it's going to rain like hell this weekend," and so I go out and buy sandbags. Um, that's just responding to what could be a legitimate threat, right? I mean, it's
Right.
not necessarily complete bullshit, right?
Well, I mean, in general, not necessarily. There are a fair amount of well-intended policies engaged by the Treasury Secretary and the Federal Reserve to keep the economy healthy for the benefit of all. What has happened in the last 4 years and continues to probably happen is these policies have unintended consequences where the wealth divide has gotten greater. So if you look at the response to COVID, it has been a global, it's basically been the fix is in globally by all the global governments to juice their monetary policy and fiscal policy and interest rates to keep the nominal value of assets going up. Not necessarily the real value, but the nominal value, right? Because it's relative to the value of money and inflation, et cetera. That has really benefited those who control assets. So this whole endeavor, albeit maybe well-intended in many cases, has continued to exacerbate the wealth divide. The wealthier have gotten significantly wealthier, and those who do not control assets have been left behind. And ultimately, that's not a sustainable model for any republic.
Yeah, that's right. That's usually what precipitates the downfall of every great empire
Yep.
throughout
Yeah.
history. Yeah.
Yeah, and like where's that breaking point? But we are wider now than we've ever been. The policies that we engaged in to stimulate this stock market recovery, we've never done before. Our Federal Reserve went in and actually into the open market, and for the first time since their charter in the early 1900s, bought securities. We used to always engage in stimulative policies, which would be like buying back U.S. Treasuries, flooding the market with liquidity, keeping interest rates artificially low. But we actually went in to the open markets and bought securities to create liquidity to keep this thing going. It's manipulated. I would say the securities markets are more manipulated now than ever. So when you invest, it used to be, I'm going to buy Apple because I believe in Apple and I believe in what they're doing. I believe in their products. I believe in their balance sheet. Now, when you buy Apple, you've got one eye on what the Fed policy is. Because if
Brad, let me ask you this question. This is because I have a very rudimentary understanding of these things. So
Mhm.
I understand the basic idea of a stock buyback and
Yeah.
how essentially it's usually not that good for the regular guy. It's a way to keep floating that value. Companies aren't reinvesting in worker wages; they're reinvesting in stock buyback to keep, and that sounds like what you're talking about with the government. The government essentially is buying, doing a stock buyback to artificially inflate the value. Am I totally wrong?
No. I mean, you're relatively right. I mean that the credit markets in the Great Recession, the Great Recession, if you will, the credit markets pretty much froze, right? So there was no way for these large firms to get liquid on assets they owned. So that's when Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, and Merrill Lynch and Bank of America were both probably 12 to 24 hours from going bankrupt. And so the Fed will go in and unfreeze these markets by injecting cash into the markets. This time it became worse. The markets were more frozen, and these large financial institutions, which depend on trading amongst each other, um, couldn't get things sold that they needed to get sold to create cash. So basically, our government went in and said, we're just going to buy securities in the market to unfreeze these markets. And it's never been done before, to go into the open market and buy.
And so we don't know whether that was, I mean, it helped.
It
We don't
helped.
we don't know long term whether that's a brilliant move or dangerous move, uh, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, right now it's fascinating. I mean, the market is trading. So the way you really can kind of benchmark a market's valuation isn't necessarily the price, right? I mean, one stock might trade for 800, another stock might trade for 8. That 800 might not be more expensive than the 8 relative to the earnings of that company. So we always look at the price earnings ratio. How much is the stock trading relative to a dollar worth of earnings of the company? Historically, the market's traded about 16 times earnings. So the average of the company's making $1, the stock traded for 16. If they're making on average $2, the stock traded for 32. So it's almost like you're buying 16 times the earnings. And that's been a pretty reasonable average, 16 to 18 for the most part. The market right now is trading closer to 34, 35 times earnings. Historically, extremely high. What changed? Are companies growing faster? Yeah, maybe the top 5% are, but in the whole, not all of them. What changed was policy. And that's what's hard for a lot of people with cash, is how do you invest in this market when it's so policy driven? It's not value driven,
Right.
Can
We
policy
you
driven.
we
can you
just
talk a little bit about that, Brad? Can you give us some examples of policies that have impacted the market that drive the markets like this?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people would say interest rates have been kept artificially low,
Okay.
right? And so when interest rates are low, there's nowhere for cash to go. There's no money markets or CDs paying anything worth a darn. So the conservative investor that wants to sit in cash is going to have a negative return after taxes relative to inflation. So it forces cash into more aggressive investments. And people will say they've been kept artificially low because the Trump administration would tweet and bully the Fed Reserve, or because the government stopped tracking the right things in the CPI numbers. They intentionally took things out of CPI to keep inflation numbers artificially low. But no matter how you slice it, somewhere along the line in the last decade or so, we've decided, or someone helped us decide, that you measure the success of an administration based off the stock market.
Right.
And that's the stock market's, kind of the optics of the market. Is the number bigger or lower? And it's a real easy thing to do, is you just pump the system full of dollars and keep rates low, and it's gonna go higher because there's no alternative for that cash.
John said it's almost like an enhanced video game. Julia said it's true. I think it is a good thing. I never learned this stuff in high school myself.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah,
They don't teach this stuff in high school, Julia.
yeah, and most people don't know this stuff, and this is part of why the wealth divide is getting greater. Is those who are in the know have conversation, like, what the Fed says in their minutes is always very calculated and very cryptic, but those of us in the industry will read through the Fed's minutes and say, oh, they're going to keep rates low, they're going to infuse more liquidity, they're going to do a buyback, this is going to be stimulative to these asset classes we're plowing in. So the game is such that it does favor those with the cash and those in the know.
Sure.
which to me, that part is fair. It's the pushing around and artificially moving the value of something, and being sneaky, and there are ways which, I mean, if you have assets, you know you have knowledge, and play fairly, that's fine. The thing that I've complained a lot about on the show is, like, a lot of that wealth goes into, um, buying politicians, lobbying for policies that then favor, like it just keeps stacking the deck for certain, and it's not in a fair way. It's not
Right.
like what you just described. Not just
Right.
I have a stack of cash and I have knowledge. It, it's much sneakier and less honest than that. I mean, not every, obviously there are people that are ethical, but there's so many examples of all kinds of sneakiness that going on. And I mean, I usually only really know about it when there's like a movie about somebody getting rich, but that's
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, money moves DC. The lobbyists move DC. Money gets campaigns funded. Favors are then returned. That is what makes policy move. It's very, very rarely altruistic. And if a candidate gets in under altruism, they are pretty quickly co-opted by the reality of the situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. So we've got this $1.9 trillion package that's being, pushed. And as you said, the interest rates are low. It's a good time to borrow if that's real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So how there's a lot of bristling about the amount of money, and I'm not sure why there's bristling now more than there was a year ago or however long ago. But how does borrowing that money, like what effect can that have on us? What negative impact can that have on us?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? So it's managing the balance sheet, whether it's your household, your business, or your government. If you get too leveraged and too beholden to those you own money to, you start to lose control of the value or your power. The largest holder of debt of the United States is China. So the more leverage you get, the more power you put in the hands of China. Our interest rates, our Federal Reserve, our government, we control the short end of the curve. We can set interest rates for the short end of interest rates, the overnight lending rate, et cetera. We can't control the 10-year Treasury rate. The 10-year Treasury rate is a free market rate. So if you own 10-year Treasury bonds, and a lot of them, and you decide to be a seller or a buyer, you're going to affect the rate. Most of the lending products that people use, 30-year mortgage, is really priced off the 10-year Treasury rate. So it's fascinating that if you get so leveraged that someone stops wanting to own your debt and they become a net seller of your debt, you lose control of your interest rates. As soon as you lose control of your interest rates, you lose control of your asset values. So it becomes a power game. And all this is an agreed upon metric, right? Just like like what's the threshold? And so all of this is like, it goes back to like fiat currencies. What's a dollar worth? Dollar is only worth something because we all agree it is. What's it worth relative to another asset or a currency? It becomes, all of this is like a social agreement at some point.
And we don't agree what it's we don't agree what it's worth either. I mean,
Right.
you try taking $100 and going to Ensenada and see what you can do, and then go to New York City and see what you can do. Like, we don't
Right.
agree with the value of it. Of course, there are all kinds of geographic and political reasons for that. But we don't agree on it.
Right. And some would argue we may all agree at some point that it's worth nothing. So that's the fascinating thing about fiat currency. That leads into a whole discussion about digital currency versus paper money. And it used to be the argument with, well, they're just bits and bytes, and it's just some sort of algorithm or mathematical equation on a ledger hosted by all these servers, and therefore it's nothing. The counter argument being that the piece of paper in your wallet is nothing unless we agree it's something.
Brad, do you know a lot of people who have millions and millions of dollars?
Yes.
What do you think drives them?
It's different for most. A lot of them, I think, are. You mean what drives them to make more money?
Yeah, let me tell you why I've become really interested in this question. I have been, I've never been a wealthy person. And even when I was a kid, my biggest goals were, I was probably someone who was more enamored with fame than when I was in acting school and I had record deals and stuff. I think my goal was fame.
Right.
It was never really about money. And as I've gotten older, I learned that even my desire for fame actually came from broken parts of me. And as I
Yeah.
got healthier, I felt those needs less and less. And then as I was telling you earlier, it's been the last 2 years where I've really become as financially comfortable as I've ever been in my life. And I told you right before the show started, through the happenstance because of the nature of our business, I've had the best financial year of my life by a long shot. And I got to tell you, I mean, like I'm a 50-year-old guy. I'm not rolling in the clubs and drinking Cristal, and trying to impress chicks and stuff. So,
Not
but
yet.
I got
It's important to have goals, though, John.
that midlife crisis is just around the corner, boys. Hair transplant, get my teeth whitened, but I got to tell you, my experience has been, I did some things. I paid a bunch of debt off, bought a couple of trips for my family and stuff, and then I kind of went, okay.
Yeah.
And I don't have. There's nothing in me that compels me to try to get more of that. Now, I started transcendental meditation this year.
Yeah.
Very challenging for me.
Yeah.
Super driven to get better at that. I
Yeah.
want more of it. Eric and I started doing martial arts. I bought all this weight equipment. We're boxing and kickboxing, and I'm like all old and crickety, but I'm still
Yeah.
trying to do it. I want more of, and I can pinpoint why I want more of it because there's a type of awareness that feels very good to me. But I'm just wondering if you're a person like me, and you've got so much money you could never use it all,
Right.
and you spend most of your waking hours trying to get more. What is that?
I think for some people, there's an ego element of I want to win. I
Mm-hmm.
want to show people that I'm worthy of this. I want to show myself that I'm worthy of this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I want to make up for self-loathing from my childhood or whatever. There is an element of that. I think for some people, it's just that's what they enjoy. They don't have a hobby. They don't have another skill. This is their, this is where they get satisfaction is they're really good at business. They're really good at understanding how to make dollars into more dollars. And that's just their natural aptitude. It isn't necessarily unhealthy for everybody,
Right.
but certainly there are a lot that are trying to fill a hole that's goes to infinity.
I'm
So
not
they'll
trying to
never fill it.
suggest that's necessarily sick. I mean, I'm just and like you said, if that is your natural aptitude, look, one of the things, and I jumped off a lot of cliffs because of this. When I was young, I had a natural aptitude that got me a lot of attention. Being a singer,
Yeah.
got you a lot of attention, and I had a lot of issues when I was a young man. You were there for a lot of them, Brad.
Yes.
Um, so,
And I
uh,
still love you.
uh, so, I, I understand that having that maybe for those folks like in our society, we worship wealth, and we don't care how you got wealthy. We
No.
worship wealth.
Yeah. Well, there's a freedom and a power element and almost a celebrity element to it that it's awe-inspiring. I can tell you that those who have wealth aren't necessarily happier than you, but they certainly have a lot more freedom to do what they want to do when they want to do it. They
That
have a
is
lot more problems, right? They have a lot more skepticism. They have a fair amount more of justified paranoia, wondering who's in their life and why in their life and what their real angle is.
Yeah,
But when
I had a good buddy who got really rich one summer, like that. Over the course of 4 months, he personally put about 1.5 million in his bank account, right? And he told me at the end of that year, he said, a rich man just has a different set of problems.
Yep.
And I recently heard Jim Carrey say, I wish everybody should get rich and famous. so you can see that that's not the answer to anything. I heard him
Yeah.
say that recently. John,
I, 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 I say there's a threshold, there's almost like a sweet spot where you have enough money to not have to stress about day to day like a lot of people do, but not so much money that you acquire so many assets that your assets own you instead of you owning them.
Well, being a social scientist, we we have studied this, and what Brad said. It shows over and over and over again in all the studies. It really is like once you get to the point of being able to take care of basic needs and have a little bit of cush.
Mm-hmm.
After that, it doesn't really have much effect.
No.
It really doesn't.
Carol said the happiest, wealthy people I know are those who finally retired from making it and now spend a lot of it helping other people in their community. John Manitti said, "I've got your 1099 in my hands, John. That's not true." Luckily, it wasn't from you, John.
Yeah.
So Ben said, "Brad, you once told me 2 million was the perfect wealth. Can you talk that out here?"
Yeah, I no longer think that's the right number. I have to adjust that for inflation and time value of money, and maybe my own personal tastes have expanded. But I do think there is a sweet spot, and I don't know if it's 5 million or 10 million or somewhere in between there. But there's a spot where I don't have to worry about my mortgage. I don't have to worry about health care for my children. They can go to a college they want to go to. I might even be able to seed them a little bit in their life with a down payment gift or something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good place to be for most people. When you get too far beyond that, you've got a large salary of professionals around you steering the ship. You've got lawyers, you've got accountants, you've got financial advisors. Everyone's on your books in some capacity. You're acquiring assets. You got multiple properties and homes, and you've got a complex life. You've got you've got landscaping and maids and whatever it is. It just continues to snowball. And then you feel a little bit of a burden of I've got all this shit and not one of them makes me any more happier.
Yeah, I had a guy that mentored me in a little business thing, and he was a great guy. He's passed away. His name was Mark Yarnell, and when I met him, he was worth about 150 million and something like that. And he told me a couple of times that I was a lot happier when I was worth 25.
Yeah, yeah,
Said
yeah.
that
It's a little bit of be careful what you wish for. And the thing about wealth is you keep setting this new high tide mark. And now when you drop below that, it feels stressful. It feels like you're losing control. It feels like you're failing. I find first generation wealth, those who created their wealth, typically have a much healthier relationship with their money. And they don't fear the loss of it so much because they know they made it once and they could probably make it again. And they knew they were happy before they had it. Second, third generation wealth have only known wealth. That's been a part of their identity. They don't necessarily know they can make it back if they lost it. And it's a much less healthy, in many ways, a huge burden on them.
They didn't do it. They didn't. They
Right.
weren't the ones that. Yeah. They should feel insecure about making it because they didn't make it in the first place.
Yeah.
But that's true with everything, right? I mean,
Yeah, it is.
we once you kind of like show yourself that you can accomplish something. If something gets in your way, like I'll just a silly example. John had a surgery not that long ago. John has kept himself in great shape for a long time, and kind of had ups and downs with that. He never was the least bit worried about getting back into rehabbing from his surgery and getting back in shape and doing that because he proved himself, over and over and over again that he could do that.
Yep.
Same thing. It's whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and if you figure your second or third generation wealth, you might not even be the personality type that wants the wealth. You might not have ever would have craved it had you been born not into it. But now you're almost burdened with it. Yeah. And there's a set of expectations that come from you.
Right.
And a way that people look at you that you may not even feel. It's fascinating.
I think it's a very important subject to understand better in the United States of America because I obviously I want to be financially successful for the reasons you talked about, Brad. I think it's really nice to just be able to, not worry about taking your kids to the doctor and things like that. That's a there's a lot of peace and happiness in that.
Right.
But I also want our society to thrive, and I think that we have a very unhealthy relationship to capitalism in our country that could, that could spell the end for our nation.
Yeah, and I think there's a whole generation of people that are reevaluating the merits of capitalism and the benefits they've been sold on capitalism. And this could get into a real deeper conversation, but you know, capitalism certainly has its pitfalls and its dark spots, and unchecked, you know, greed greed has been a motivator of most of poor behavior of humankind over the years, right? Almost any great empire seems to fail at the hands of greed. But without capitalism, without return for risk, human nature doesn't tend to take risk. So the great innovations in science, in medicine, technology have come from the pursuit of a reward of financial gain.
Yeah, no, there's no question. There's all kinds of darkness that capitalism has pulled humanity out of. You said unchecked, and I think that's the important word.
That is
Right.
an important word, and we talk about that a lot here with the crony capitalism and what we were just talking about earlier with artificially manipulating markets and subsidizing this industry over here or this company over here. And
Ah,
I mean, it's there's a way that it's not really it's not a free market, as we said. And but I always wonder about that. I mean, I think you're right in terms of rewards, of course, rewards. But as you guys were having that conversation about why more wealth, I've studied more about people, and what is absolutely true about human beings is that we are hardwired to look for danger, to prepare for the future, to look for to anticipate the shitty things that are on the
right,
horizon.
right,
So that's what we're hardwired to do. And so there is there is part of that's very natural. It's not like no matter what you've done, you're still scanning the horizon for the next danger that
right.
you know um and so it it doesn't, and I think that's not going to stop. And I don't think I mean, we see that. Okay, so we can all agree that there are some people who have some um disordered, unhealthy relationship with pursuing wealth, whether that's ego or greed, whatever. But there are a lot of people that's just what they're used to doing from from that perspective. Like
Hmm.
all they know how to do is prepare for the future, and they can't. They're not wired to be able to just sit back and enjoy it. And
Right.
but I think basically we're all going to do that. When we talk about, I think it's a strange conversation that people have. Like, well, if you give something, I don't know, healthcare. Because I was smiling when you guys were talking about your kids. I was like, I worry about every kid having
Yeah.
being able to go to the
Yeah.
doctor. Um,
You
like
fucking communist.
Yeah.
there is no question as far as healthcare goes. I am super, super hard left. I think if the government isn't going to do that, what the fuck are they in there for? Like, why do we even have taxes if we're not going to take care of people's health? Like, that's ridiculous. Like, so I'm guilty as charged on that particular. But I do believe competition is amazing. That um, and we do get pushed to heights through competition. We need a type of competition in our economic system. We
Carol said, "We want capitalism that includes higher wages paralleling profits." Raphael said, "Very interesting discussion. I don't seek wealth, I seek financial independence."
Yeah.
Denise said, "It's not capitalism, but unregulated, predatory capitalism that is the
Yep.
problem."
And I agree with him, and I think most people do. It's easy to identify the problems. Solutions are hard to come by. So do you solve it through taxes? I mean, I think we all agree that the government is the most inefficient organization there is. Governments by nature, like any other organization, want to grow and sustain themselves. They never shrink. They increase the inefficiencies. I'm not a pro give the government more resources to redistribute guy, because they've never shown themselves to be an efficient source of redistribution, right?
It's a
I
really
mean,
good point. That's a very, very good point. We've talked about that a little bit. And Eric has made the point that when the government wants to be, it's quite efficient. It's very efficient at building bombs. It's very efficient at police departments and things like that. When that goal is a priority to the society.
yeah, or a priority of those in power. But I think, like look at right now, what was the California just realized their EDD program just gave away $13 billion of mistaken benefits to people who weren't supposed to get them. I mean, that's a material oversight. And you could also argue that Bill Gates, one of the wealthiest people in the world, has been one of the best stewards of wealth. That the dollars that went to Bill and redistributed intelligently to places of need globally are probably much more efficient than had we taken those dollars and given them to the government.
Yeah.
So there's a couple things that I want to say. Like John's right. I see many ways which the government does a good job. However, I think that because of greed and special interest and identity politics, that's what makes it efficient. There are plenty of smart people that could solve the, you know, come up with lots of great solutions,
Right.
implement great solutions. It's just that there are these two bodies that have these special interests behind them that are fighting against, like fighting, each other, as opposed to, there's a bunch of stupid people in the government too. I mean, I'm like, sorry, but I hear some of them
Oh,
talk. They're not bright. I don't know how they ever got there. But you're totally right as far as we don't buy into I, I, we don't buy into the conspiracy theories um, about Bill Gates. In fact, I just listened to this podcast the other day with his wife. I think his wife's smarter than he is. Uh,
oh,
she's a brilliant woman, and they've done so much good around the world. It's incredible, and I agree with you. This is where I think that one of the things that we learned about the government and the presidency, people are like, well, economics are the most important thing. So you put a businessman in. Well, a businessman is used to stomping on his competition. Like that's not necessarily. I think that was a poor choice for a president just from that aspect. But in terms of putting somebody like that in charge of a project, a
right.
singular project, I think a wealthy businessman in charge of, a project is a wise, or woman, businesswoman.
Right.
John and I were talking the other day about how successful some of the female leaders around the world have been, but that seems like a smarter way to go.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Not to get on pro or anti-Trump, but he's second generation wealth, and we talked about the difference between first and second generation wealth, right? So it's a different makeup. I anytime you identify a problem, which is easy to do, and then try to come up with an offsetting solution, it usually involves money and distribution of money. And so where does that dollar come from? That's always the challenge. Does it come in the form of higher taxes? And what are the unintended consequences in the change of that taxes? Biden's program increased taxes on those making over $400,000. What are the unintended consequences of that? Increasing capital gains. You raise minimum wage. There's a ton of unintended consequences and a lot of science behind the concept of a higher minimum wage. I'm not pro or con on it. I'll just throw it out there. So if I'm an employer, I'm only going to hire someone if their contribution, their enterprise value to me is in excess of their cost to me. That's the business decision. I'm going to hire Eric and John because I'm going to make more money on them than I can pay them, right? if there's a minimum wage of X dollars, and there's a large portion of the population that don't create that much enterprise value, they're going to remain unemployed and replaced by robotics, et cetera. If you want to break,
plan anyway. But let me ask you this. This is important. We have seen the cost of living just go out of control, and wages barely move. And when we see the government coming in on the side of big business and continually helping them to continue to make the unrealistic goal of continuing to have quarterly profit increases, that's a ridiculous idea that only Americans, I mean, it's not realistic. And so what's happened is, I mean, at what point do we get to do the workers get some of that taken, get taken care of the way that the corporations have? Because it's out of control. People can't, I mean, you're talking about that wealth gap earlier.
mm-hmm.
Part of it is because everything's so expensive, but our wages, expenses have are 600 times higher, and our wages are 6 times higher. I mean, it's,
Well, and those large corporations are paying less in taxes on a percentage basis than most Americans. And that's clearly wrong. And I think that ultimately will be addressed. But, and I don't pretend to have any answers, but I do think it's interesting to look at the unintended consequences, because the average employer is not Amazon or Walmart necessarily in any of our communities. It's a lot of small business people. And let's say I'm a small financial planning firm, and I would like to groom some interns into my field. It used to be 10 years ago, I could take an intern in and pay them nothing. But they had a way to bootstrap their way into my industry, which ultimately could become a really rewarding industry. Now I got to pay them $15 an hour. And quite honestly, no college intern is going to create an enterprise value to me whatsoever. So I'm probably not going to take them in. That's just like a small case study, but like that times a lot. There are a lot of businesses that will just not hire that person, and therefore you can't bootstrap your way into an industry anymore. There's no entry point. The door's closed because we've made it illegal for you to take a job that pays a wage under a certain threshold that was decided by a certain politician, lawmaker.
So let me say this. I agree with you. And, I work for a nonprofit organization. It is extraordinarily, we run a deficit every year. We have a foundation that raises money that gets us back up to zero every year. Paying people minimum wage is hard for our agency. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
So I get how that, we've got 250 employees. We're a small company. I get how that affects, it's not like I'm unfamiliar with this.
Right.
But in my mind, if a business, especially a for-profit business, which is most, if your business model relies on your workers making wages that they can't pay rent, and they have to rely on the government for healthcare, then your business model is a piece of shit that needs to go. And I don't know, I don't have the sophistication, and so if you force that, eventually somebody's going to have to come up with a business model that includes people not having to have 3 fucking jobs to work for you, or to ask the taxpayers to pay for their health care, which is what happens in a lot of these situations. And a lot of those, this isn't true for small companies, certainly, but for the big companies, as I said, their profits continue to go up every fucking quarter. So, and meantime, we're paying through our taxes for their health care and for other, for food stamps and for, other things. It's a system that needs adjustment.
And I don't disagree with anything you said. I just think it's so complex because the average restaurant owner in any town is understaffing now and overworking their employees because they can't afford to take on more employees because of the wages. And it's a bit of a catch 22. Housing's a whole nother thing. I mean, so Biden's got very good intentions, right? He wants to increase the down payment tax credit. That's probably a good idea. I mean, we've had that before, and it helps stimulate the housing market. But do we want to stimulate the housing market? All that does is continue to price small families out of the housing market.
Don't you
So
think? Don't you think we should have? Uh, don't you have market segments that have that are that are dictated by our collective morals as a society rather than by capitalism? Shouldn't it be immoral to for anybody to be homeless in our society? You know, shouldn't we have elements of our society where winner take all is not the rule? I believe I believe that this is ultimately a spiritual issue among. We need to Star Trek this shit. Like the Federation, they created a society that would move beyond war. They moved beyond. They didn't have money anymore. You know,
right,
I'm not suggesting we should get rid of money. We're not ready to do that. But I think we need. It's like that quote, Eric, that I use all the time. Jordan Peterson, the antidote for the tyranny of society is the and it's the antidote for the tyranny of society and the individual is the well-developed person. You we need we need to find a way to collectively have a system of values that says go and be as abundant as you want, but not on the backs of these other people. So if you go out and you sell that guitar on the wall behind Brad, you should be able to make a great guitar, sell it for all you want. But when education increases by 6,000% over 20, we have to look at that because education is one of the ways people improve the quality of their lives. And if that door is so narrow that few people can get through it, what do we think is going to happen? It seems so unwise for us to let that happen.
well, and I agree with you. And it's not, and ultimately, it's not sustainable. So even out of your own self-interest, if you're in someone in a position of power or wealth, you don't want the divide to get so great because it crumbles. So even if it's not altruistic and it's out of self-interest, you have to solve it. But the solve, again, is so hard because, like you said earlier, John, if you take all the money away and redistribute it evenly, it's going to end up back in the hands of probably those with similar characteristics that have it now. So you can't necessarily, by your logic, solve it by redistribution of wealth. And so are you trying to engineer, this is a Kamala Harris thing, and I'm not pro or con any of this stuff. I'm just bringing it up for a conversation point. She made a comment prior to the election that got some people riled up, which is, I don't want to create equal opportunity. I want to create equal outcome. And that is, I think, at the heart of what you're saying, John, is do you want to put enough controls around the system that you create equal outcome or equal opportunity? Because equal opportunity is more of a meritocracy. Yeah. Equal outcome is independent of your merits.
Well, and so, Brad, I'm I'm trying to get a couple levels deeper than that. I don't think any of this can be legislated.
Now I'm on that page.
I'm suggesting that if all the money is going to end up in the hands of those same people, I hope those people have a value system where they say, me getting more isn't the most important thing to me. How, a lot of people are down on Bezos, but that guy gives a lot of money away.
Yeah.
To charity. He's invested a lot of money in clean energy and stuff. You talked about Bill, we need more Bill Gates and fewer Rupert Murdochs, I guess. I don't know, but you know what I'm talking about?
No, I do. And that is a bigger, I think, want or goal for any of us who are kind of forward looking and maybe have a little bit more spiritual depth in our thoughts. That yes, if there's kind of a global awakening of that we're all interconnected and none of us can really thrive if we don't all thrive, But that's a deeper journey, and I don't know how you necessarily get there. Maybe
Have you
get
guys been paying attention to what's been going on lately? I mean, that you guys are talking about some pie in the sky bullshit. I do think that, it's possible.
Aren't you the Buddhist in the bunch?
I am. Um, I do think it's possible, but I look around. I mean, Buddhists, like, what you're supposed to do is notice what is, uh, like, and what I've been seeing, and one of the things that, I mean, 20 million people over the summer in the streets protesting, an assault on the Capitol. Those those things are at least in part due to this wealth gap that we're talking about.
Yeah.
The unrest we have is not only about identity politics. It's about that wealth gap, and when people, like I said, when people have 3 jobs and then shit happens to them from the government, they're super fucking pissed. They can't take anymore. They don't have any. Their cup is full just with trying to keep their life going. And
Right.
so and we do need to figure out, and the rich people should figure out how to address that, because we don't want people storming the castle. We don't want 20 million people in the streets. And and the same thing is true for the environment. Like, the earth is only going to give for so long if we don't take care of it. And we already see, some really dire situations happening. We've got to figure out how to create some sustainability pretty quickly.
I think we do that by. I do believe that this is an issue that at its core is a lack of spiritual depth, and what Brad said, what comes out of that spiritual depth is not all this, bullshit fundamentals of religion that we see around us, but a sense that we are all interconnected and we're dependent upon one another, and that what happens to one happens to all of us, and that we want to some reasonable extent, of course, take care of each other as well as ourselves. That's why I'm going to spend my last 5 minutes really eviscerating Christians. But I digress here. Hey, Ben, you're here just in time.
Hi.
You're here just in time for us to say goodbye.
Hi. Yeah. Sorry, I just had to jump in at the end. Brad, good to see you. You're awesome.
Thanks, buddy.
So I just wanted to throw in one real quick point on what we were just talking about last. I can't type fast enough, but the idea that this money, it should trickle from below, right? So these tax breaks helped wealthy people, didn't do a whole lot. They made a lot of money up top, but so if the money comes from below, it's going to trickle up, right? Because if Bezos or Musk or anybody is actually offering a product worth having, then the money's going to get to them. Like you said, Brad, that, if we took all the money and it would end up in the same people's hands because they're the movers and the shakers.
Mm-hmm.
But if we have the money coming from below rather than just subsidized directly to the top, it's going to benefit more levels along the way. And I think that's economy right there, not stock market, not Musk's wealth or anything else. That is economy. I spend 100% of what I make in the economy. And I don't own GameStop. I don't have any stocks. Until tonight, Brad, I had no idea what the stock market was about.
I agree with you, Ben. That's kind of where that Andrew Yang freedom dividend is placed. It's that exact theory. I mean, and it gets back to my inefficient government theory. If we just give the government more and have them do it through programs, that's way less effective than just paying everyone a dividend. And there's a lot of academic and logical support behind that. And I think that's speaking to what you're speaking of. If you did just give a basic dividend out, then that would stimulate the economy from the bottom up as opposed to the trickle down Reaganomics.
That's what the relief packages are all about, right? We're giving people money that's going to help them, and it's all going into the economy and it's trickling up.
Yeah, unfortunately, the PPP programs went the wrong direction, went in the hands of the wrong people most of the time. And in this most recent relief package, an overwhelming majority of the dollars actually go overseas to all kinds of favorite little projects for different politicians that would blow your mind.
We joke about that whole point is because oversight. Remember, somebody told everybody that they were going to be the oversight. There hasn't been the oversight necessary. There's been all those programs, yes, that there's and yes, like Reagan said, the whole scary thing about government coming to help you, it is kind of a chance to have government in control, because it's hard to oversee all that and make it perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But it is our money. We paid it. We all paid that money. We didn't want to, but we had to. As a matter of fact, you don't have a choice. It comes out of your check regardless. You don't have a checkbox that says, I'm not going to pay this. They'll take it. So,
and now those dollars that you worked hard for and were taxed on and are coming back to you in the form of the stimulus package, it's something like $8 billion or something is going to gender studies in like Thailand. There's hundreds of millions of dollars going to the Kennedy Center.
Well, yeah, you can look at that in the other way too, but Kentucky gets a lot more than they spend in taxes back from the Fed. California supports a lot of people like Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul's Kentucky, who bitch about it. Rand Paul, Mr. Fiscal Conservative, while California bails Kentucky out of everything. Yeah. You know,
but Brad is right. I mean, what common sense? Forget about politics. What common sense in this time would cause anybody to say, "Hey, let's throw some of this pork in that bill, and not give that money to our people who are struggling." I mean, he's right. Those things drive me crazy. It's so foolish. It's such foolishness, and that's what erodes people's faith in any type of government.
Yeah, and that's what creates the upswell of anger and creates the unrest. I agree with Ben. I think that these dollars would be way better spent just in the form of a simple dividend to everybody, or everybody below a certain threshold. Like, keep it simple.
Yeah. There's a few comments I want to read here, guys. Stan, hi Stan. He said, wealth doesn't corrupt as much as it reveals. That's good.
Yeah.
Carol said, Brad, one reason interns don't produce value is they need more and better education. Community colleges need to increase the areas of training they provide, but that takes tax money. Mike Boone, you might remember him.
Booney!
He said, he said hi to you earlier. I forgot to tell you, I'm sorry.
I love Booney.
He said, when I started as a carpenter, we hand nailed everything. Then I was required to buy a nail gun and a compressor. We built homes much faster, but my wage never increased. Homes did not get cheaper. Who benefited from all the increased productivity?
Now he's an architect.
Yeah.
My brother, Joe, is on. He said, hi, Brad. Great conversation and insight. What's a good book or a person to follow that can help a person better understand wealth and the rules to the game?
Hi, Joe. I love Joe too. You know what is a great book? Someone gave to me right when I got into this industry, and I still have it in my cabinet back there. A Random Walk Down Wall Street. If you want to get a good basis of how we got to where we are, pick up A Random Walk Down Wall Street. It takes you through all kinds of economic crazes, like the tulip craze. When we start talking about what has value, do you know there was a time where tulips were the most sought after asset? Tulips, flower.
In Denmark when they were making those things, yeah.
It became where everyone put their life savings was into tulips. But it takes you through a whole journey. A random Walk Down Wall Street, I would recommend, is a good read.
Hey, you know who's good? What's the guy, Brad? I've listened to a ton of his podcast, and he has great advice on like just regular investing and stuff. His name's Dave something or other.
Dave Ramsey.
Dave Ramsey.
Yeah.
If you're a person who has a normal job and you're looking to get out of debt and make some simple investments, I think he has a lot of good advice.
Yep.
He's super Christian-y, which freaks me out a little bit sometimes, but he's got great information.
There's a guy on Twitter that's worth a follow with good, simple information. Mikey Taylor. Mikey grew up in, I think, like Thousand Oaks area, professional skateboarder, recently retired. And Mikey every day gives a little lecture on personal finances for the everyday person. Well intended, worth a follow.
Guys, we are all out of time, I think.
Oh, I
But
thought we were just getting started.
bullshit, dude. Brad, look, I know you still skate, so I know what those knees are doing to you. You've been standing up for a long time. This guy still pulls airs in the pool, man.
I'm still just dumb enough to think I'm young.
Have you been surfing at all?
I've been surfing a ton. The last few swells, I got some really, really good surf. Came down, surfed Rincon, Ventura Point, Pitus. And then up here, it just maxes out, but we find our little spots in the harbor mouths and stuff. I've been surfing a lot.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, next time you're down, please call me. I want to go.
I will.
I bought a couple of new boards this year. That's something I did.
Brad, thank you very much. That was very instructive in the beginning for those of us that really are clueless with the stock market. You know, as much, and we've talked about this on the show lots of times, stock market, you know, references to stock market. We really didn't know what the hell we were talking about. Thank you very much for clarifying.
Yeah,
You
totally.
bet. You bet. Happy to come on anytime and get into the fundamentals of what a stock is and how it works and how to value one or anything like that. So let me know.
Yeah, we will definitely be calling you to come back. Dude, we love you, Brad. It's really good to see you, man.
Love all you guys. Good to see you guys.
All
Love
right.
you, Brad. Thanks.
Thanks,
All right.
Brad.
Bye.
All right, and Ben left too. Okay, now it's just you and me, Eric. I'll do this for Brad. I'll get in. Well, guys, it's time for me to piss a bunch of people off, as I do. That was a great show. I'm really excited about it. I'm gonna read my final piece tonight, and I'm gonna talk very plainly about how I feel about some of the things we talked about tonight around how our society has interpreted religions. And I want to preface this by saying to anybody out there watching, first of all, if you're really sensitive about your religion, you should probably go. You know, don't watch this. I don't want to offend anybody, but I do want to challenge you. I'm a person who grew up in the Catholic Church. I left at a very young age, but I've never gone back to being a Christian. But I've maintained a very close relationship with Jesus. I read the Bible and books about Jesus all the time. I consider him to be a very misunderstood character in human history, and I think that we need him now in a way we don't understand, especially with the type of political zealotry that's out there. So that's the kind of people that I'm speaking to in this post. I know there's a bunch of wonderful things Christians do, and I know that most Christians are very decent people. But I wanted to give you the guys that I hope that was respectful, and I wanted to give you that little bit of caveat before I do this. So the way I see it is Joe Biden and the Democrats see their efforts to get relief in the form of another round of direct payments into the hands of the struggling American people, only to be thwarted again by Republicans in the Senate. I feel the need to use this very small platform to share a genuine concern of mine based on a very puzzling element of American culture. The most confusing aspect of American society, in my eyes, is those who identify with the phrase conservative Christian. I have no wish to insult anyone due to their political stance, nor do I care to question anyone's faith. I'm just telling you the truth. I don't understand. I don't understand how a group of people whose values could be so clearly defined could align so strongly with a movement that so vigorously flouts so many of those values. Let me give you an example. Christian conservatives in the media and on social media attack Bernie Sanders for the last 8 years because he wants to use our tax dollars to provide education and health care for all Americans. The majority of conservative Christian Americans I know of do not support this plan. They call it Marxism, communism, etc. However, they did support a tax cut in 2017 under the last administration. I've never heard of, nor can I find in my research, an example of a conservative Christian organization speaking out against the Trump tax cuts. But let me show you guys some numbers, all right? According to the Center, hold on, let me pull this up. I want you guys to just look at something real quick here. Let me do this. Let me share my screen with all of you, and I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to share that, and then I'm going to go find something I want you all to see. Tell me if you guys can see this, Eric. Let me close that down. I want you guys to be able to see this. Can you guys can you see that? This is where the tax cuts essentially went. Okay? And according to, let me come back and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That is a graph. That graph is from the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. They're a nonpartisan research institute. They've been working with federal offices since 1981. The top 1% of households in our country will get 61% of that tax cut on pass-through income in 2024, while the bottom 2/3 of households will see just 4%. This law, which clearly benefits the most wealthy, is projected by the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office to create a $1.9 trillion tax deficit over the next 10 years, and that's after factoring in considerable economic growth and before COVID. So let's apply some critical thinking here. We are planning to have budget deficits. The law is a plan to have a budget deficit. Should we create those deficits educating and taking care of the poor? Or should we create these economic shortfalls, making the wealthy more wealthy? More importantly, which one do you think Jesus would support? Well, I know which plan many American Christians supported, and I believe I know why. I mean, just look at American Christianity, enamored with prosperity gospel carnival barkers like Joel Osteen and Paula White, who treat their revivals like rock concerts and charge admission to them like rock concerts too. Their flocks are showing up in droves and paying top dollar, not to hear about Jesus' message of austere transformation, 40 days in the desert, eschewing material things. No, they're coming to be promised a bigger piece of the pie. That's the whole prosperity gospel message. In 2019, the Seattle AG shut down a site called Christian Prayer Center where you could pay to be prayed for by some weirdo who claimed to have the ear of God. Now, we all know these shysters have been around forever, except his site had over 2 million subscribers who gave him over $7.5 million over the course of a few years to pray for them. Many of these prayers for winning lottery numbers. The problem is not these dishonest people. They've always been around. The problem is that so many Christians have so deeply misunderstood Jesus that they are gullible and easily duped by charlatans. No true Christian would have ever fallen for a scam like that because people who really understand Jesus aren't seeking to become wealthy at all costs. Quite the opposite, in fact. Remember what Jesus said about the rich man's chances of entering the kingdom of heaven? They weren't good. Remember what Jesus said about the moneylenders in the temple? I'll remind you, he was pissed. He said, "You've turned my father's house into a den of thieves." I believe that in the USA today, that story is being repeated again and again. Desperate people have been sold a bill of goods that has them believing in a philosophy that has turned God's house into a den of thieves. We've allowed our Christianity to morph into a perverse philosophy of savage self-preservation that masquerades as courage and patriotism. Listen, if you want to be rich, that's great. Go to it. Just don't pretend your search for personal abundance is endorsed by Jesus. It isn't. I do want to challenge American Christians with this question. Why are you in that game? Are you here for the hard work, long dark nights of the soul, and to draw forth a you that makes this world a better place from your spiritually centered sense of duty to your fellow man, which makes the thought of seeking riches seem shallow? Or are you in it for the warm, fuzzy bath? Because you know what they say about warm baths. They feel good at first, but after a while, you're just sitting in cold, dirty water. I think you should know why you're in that game, because if you're the latter, your desperation is a serious liability in modern America. It has made you vulnerable to people who are becoming downright dangerous in the name of a false god. And like in so many of the darkest parts of human history, that false god has begun to demand sacrifices, like our democracy. Christian zealots are some of the most dangerous people in the U.S. right now. Once again, I'm not talking about the average Christian, but they're even claiming that God is getting involved in our elections and he wants them to rise up in defense of his chosen candidates. Those who have an understanding of history know how that story ends. Jesus taught us a way of living that was intensely generous, self-denying, non-violent, and centered on a love of others, at least as great as the love we bear for ourselves. I got bad news for you, wealthy evangelicals. If you truly follow Jesus, you'll want me to be at least as wealthy as you are. So how about a little cash? I started off saying, I don't want to question anyone's faith. It's not true. I do. I know most Christians are decent people who care about the right things. But the loudmouths out there getting all the time on the front page, they're really making the rest of you look bad. So I do want to question the idea behind some of the faith of a few people who don't understand this fact. If you store your treasures on earth rather than in heaven, if you already have everything you need, you're aggressively invested in getting even more. If you aren't seeking to share with and uplift others less fortunate than yourself with far more vigor than you seek to expand your own prosperity, or you vigorously support anyone who is these things, odds are you're not really a Christian. You're just someone who shows up on Sunday to hedge your bets against losing out on salvation. How can I say that? How do I know it? Simple. Jesus told me. Guys, that's our show. Thank you very much. We'll be back next week for one more Common Ground, and then we're going to change things up. From me and Eric, I want to thank Brad and Ben and all the great people that watched the show tonight. We love you guys. We'll see you all next week.
Thanks, everyone. Take care of yourself and each other.
Ooh, where am I here?